One night, a girl named Hikari was standing in front of her school while humming a tune. At that moment, Tatsuo, a math teacher at the school, happened to walk by and asked what she was doing there. Hikari was startled and looked completely panicked. The next day, the principal announced that a new teacher would be joining the staff that day. However, the new teacher still had not arrived, and the principal was surprised that someone could be late on their very first day of work. One of Tatsuo's colleagues asked if it was true that Tatsuo once researched demi-humans or agene. Tatsuo admitted that he had planned to make demi-humans the topic of his doctoral thesis, but since working with them involved many risks, ordinary teachers like him were not given permission to do so. In fact, he had never met a demi-human before. His colleague wondered why Tatsuo wanted to study them given how rare they were. Tatsuo explained that he had always wanted to interview one. Suddenly, the new teacher arrived and apologized for being late. The principal asked her to introduce herself. She explained that the train she took had been delayed due to an inspection, and it was extremely crowded. The principal understood and again asked her to introduce herself properly. Tatsuo found it odd since crowded trains were nothing unusual. His colleague, however, was not surprised because he already knew that the new teacher was a demi-human. The new teacher introduced herself as Sekie, a math teacher, and revealed that she was a succubus. Tatsuo was taken aback, realizing that he had just met a demi-human for the first time. In this world, there were people with extraordinary traits known as demi-humans. Some of the known types included succubi, vampires, and dullahans. They had long been part of folklore and legends. In the past, they were often mistreated, but discrimination against demi-humans had become rare in modern times. There were even organizations that helped those still struggling to live normal lives. For many, being a demi-human was simply seen as another part of one's identity. That day, students and teachers at Shibaseki High School were preparing for the opening ceremony of the new school year. Tatsuo approached Sakia to introduce himself, but she was clearly startled and nervous. When Tatsuo reached out his hand to greet her, Sakia panicked and accidentally dropped a ladder nearby. She quickly explained that, as a succubus, she dressed modestly and avoided physical contact with others to prevent any unintended reactions from her ability. Realizing his mistake, Tatsuo apologized for approaching her without understanding her situation. Sakia admitted that she had noticed Tatsuo watching her from afar earlier and assumed that he had only come to her out of curiosity. Feeling awkward, she excused herself and left. Tatsuo felt bad afterward, believing that she had simply misunderstood his intentions. A few days later, Tatsuo happened to run into Sakie near the school's sink area. He tried to apologize again for the previous incident, but Sakie assured him that it was fine and that he did not need to worry about it anymore. Moments later, Hikari appeared, calling out for a teacher. She was surprised to see Tatsuo standing there. Tatsuo immediately recognized her as the girl he had seen outside the school that night. It turned out that Hikari was a new student at Shibaseki High. Curious, Tatsuo asked why she had been at the school that late at night, even though the opening ceremony had not yet taken place. Hikari cheerfully explained that she had been trying on her new uniform at home and had gotten so excited about starting school that she wanted to visit right away. Tatsuo found her reasoning amusing but could not understand why she had run away when he tried to talk to her that night. According to Hikari, anyone would run if a strange older man suddenly talked to them in the dark because that was what she had been taught at school. She even said that Tatsuo should praise her for making the right decision and reacting quickly in that kind of situation. And Hikari suddenly remembered that one of her classmates was not feeling well, so she asked Tatsuo to help her take that student to the student infirmary. Tatsuo agreed and followed her. On the way, Hikari introduced herself as a student from Class 1B. When they arrived at the classroom, Tatsuo was surprised to see that Hikari's friend had no head. Hikari explained that her friend was a dullahan, a type of demi-human whose head was separated from their body. Hikari had already taken her friend's head to the infirmary earlier, but she had struggled to carry the body because it was too heavy. Tatsuo was amazed to realize that there were now 2 demi-humans at the school. He curiously asked if it was safe to touch the small blue flame that flickered at the dullahan's neck. Not long after, another student, a snow girl, was carried past them toward the infirmary because she was feeling dizzy. Tatsuo could hardly believe that demi-humans were appearing at the school one after another. While helping Hikari's friend, he asked why Hikari seemed so calm and not at all surprised to see other demi-humans. Hikari smiled and admitted that although demi-humans were rare, she was not surprised at all, because she herself was one too, a vampire. When Tatsuo arrived at the student infirmary, he was left speechless, still trying to process what had just happened. Hikari walked up to him and explained that the snow girl had simply overheated during PE class while the dullahan had just caught a cold. Tatsuo couldn't believe how easily he had come across demi-humans, and he was still in shock about the whole situation. Hikari then asked whether Tatsuo disliked demi-humans. Tatsuo quickly denied it. In fact, he admitted that he liked them. He had always wanted to meet one, but had never succeeded before, so he was genuinely happy to finally encounter them. Hearing that made Hikari smile. She hadn't expected him to feel that way, and her face turned slightly red as she realized how much it meant to him. Hikari then told him that the term ajin was old-fashioned and not really used anymore. It sounded too serious, she said, so schoolgirls nowadays preferred to call them demis. The next day, Tatsuo saw Hikari trying to borrow a book from her younger sister. When Tatsuo approached, Hikari quickly introduced her. Her name was Himari from Class 1C, and the two of them were twins. Himari finally agreed to lend the book but reminded Hikari not to scribble on it. Tatsuo commented that Himari seemed more responsible and that she apparently wasn't a demi like Hikari. A bit shyly, Tatsuo asked Hikari if she could tell him more about vampires. To his surprise, she agreed and promised to come to the biology room later. Tatsuo was thrilled to hear that. Hikari's friend, the Dullahan named Kyoko, was chatting with some classmates. They were curious about how she got to school. Did she take the bus? They wondered. But Kyoko explained that she usually walked because the buses were too crowded in the mornings, which made it dangerous for her since she always had to carry her head in her hands. Hearing that made her friends a little uneasy, so they quickly changed the topic to something lighter, like watching cute cat videos online. In most cases, being a demi wasn't something inherited. It happened due to a genetic mutation. That meant even twins could be different, with only one of them being a demi. Tatsuo still didn't really understand how demis lived their daily lives, how they thought, or how they interacted with others. There were so many questions running through his mind. That day, Hikari came to the biology room. She loved how cool, dark, and comfortable the place was. Tatsuo realized that vampires were sensitive to heat. Hikari said that the sunlight in her classroom was too bright and that she didn't want to bother her classmates by asking to block it, so she preferred to spend time in the biology room instead. Hikari reminded Tatsuo that he wanted to interview her, encouraging him to get started. Tatsuo handed her a book about vampire legends and asked what she thought of it. As Hikari flipped through the pages, she pointed out a few things that didn't really fit her experience. For example, she actually liked garlic and wasn't affected by crosses. Showing one of the pages, she joked that maybe she would die if someone pierced her heart, but that was probably true for anyone. Tetsuo then asked if vampires really needed to drink blood to survive. Hikari said she didn't think that was the case. She explained that vampires sometimes suffered from a condition similar to anemia, which was why they avoided sunlight. As long as they managed their diet well, they were perfectly fine. In fact, Hikari enjoyed eating liver with onions and drinking tomato juice since its flavor reminded her of blood. Hearing that, Tatsuo realized that vampires did indeed have a natural urge to drink blood. Hikari admitted that was true, but she also mentioned that the government provided blood packs to vampires, 1 pack per month, as part of a support program. Tetsuo remembered hearing about a vampire who lived without any government-supplied blood and asked Hikari what she thought about that. She said that such a vampire must be really impressive. When Tatsuo started to wrap up the interview, Hikari begged him to keep going so she could stay in the biology room a bit longer. Then she suddenly asked what he thought about vegetarians. Tatsuo replied that he thought vegetarians were admirable. Hikari smiled and said that it was kind of the same as vampires who chose not to rely on the government's blood supply. Curious, Tatsuo asked if she had ever wanted to drink blood directly from a person, since there were rumors that anyone bitten by a vampire would either turn into one or become their servant. Hikari admitted that she had thought about it before, though only out of curiosity. She'd never actually done it. Hikari told Tatsuo about the snow girl who was once taken to the student infirmary. The girl's name was Yuki, and her body was extremely cold. Because of that, Hikari often couldn't resist touching her. When Hikari noticed Yuki's neck, she started feeling curious and imagined how warm blood might be compared to Yuki's cold skin. At that moment, she realized she wanted to see Yuki's reactions to her playful teasing. However, Hikari knew she could never actually do something that might scare or upset her friend, since that would only make Yuki dislike her. Tatsuo thought that Hikari's imagination sounded a bit inappropriate, though Hikari herself didn't seem to notice it. He then asked if she had ever sucked blood from someone of the opposite gender. Hikari quickly denied it. Tatsuo asked again if she might prefer the blood of girls instead, but Hikari shook her head, saying maybe it was just because she had never fallen in love before. That made Tatsuo realize that for vampires like Hikari, drinking blood might have a deeper emotional meaning rather than just instinct. You could tell she didn't really take it too seriously, though she did hesitate a bit when he mentioned the idea of drinking blood from a man. Hikari was surprised that Tatsuo figured that out so quickly. According to Hikari, drinking blood directly from someone felt like something too intense, even cruel, and she wasn't the type to do that to others. She was dependable and kind, which made it difficult for her to even imagine doing such a thing. Tetsuo smiled as he looked at Hikari. She assumed he must be thinking about how fun it was to be young, while he was already a full-grown adult. Tetsuo just laughed at her comment. He could tell that Hikari was simply going through a normal stage of adolescence. Tetsuo then said it was time to end their conversation since he had to prepare for his next class. Hikari still wanted to chat more, but as the bell rang, Tetsuo gently told her to return to class. Hikari agreed, but before leaving, she playfully glanced at Tetsuo's neck and leaned in slowly, pretending as if she was going to bite him. Tetsuo was caught off guard and Hikari burst out laughing. He told her not to joke around like that, and she giggled, teasing that what she did earlier was kind of silly. When class ended later, Kyoko packed up her books. Not long after, Hikari came over to see her. Hikari asked how Kyoko was doing, saying that being her must be tough since she always had to carry her head around. She imagined how difficult it must be after school, holding her bag in one hand and her head in the other sounded dangerous. Kyoko was touched by Hikari's concern. She said she'd have gotten used to it, though she admitted it could be a little inconvenient at times. Hikari said she could understand because as a vampire, she also had her own struggles. She explained that she couldn't handle sunlight at all, and during summer, she couldn't even wear short sleeves because it felt unbearable. Kyoko laughed softly, saying that sounded troublesome. They both ended up laughing together about how unfair the world could be to them. Kyoko then asked where Hikari had gone during the lunch break. Feeling a bit shy, Hikari told her the whole story. Earlier that day, Kyoko had gone to the biology lab without bringing her head, which surprised Tetsuo. She handed him a letter she had written. Hikari and Kyoko's head were secretly watching from behind the door. In the letter, Kyoko thanked Tetsuo for helping carry her body to the student infirmary when she had a fever. She also wrote that Hikari had told her about him, and she asked if it would be alright for her to come by and chat with him sometime. Tetsuo wrote his response on the same letter and handed it back to her. Kyoko was a little startled when he gently touched her hand. After that, Kyoko and Hikari left the lab and went outside the school gates. They'd opened the letter to read his reply, and it said that Tetsuo would be happy to talk with her anytime. They both got really excited about it. Hikari was so overjoyed that she invited Kyoko to go have tea together to celebrate. That day, Kyoko came to the biology room to thank Tetsuo for carrying her body to the student infirmary when she had a fever. Tetsuo looked a bit nervous since the sight in front of him was rather unusual. Kyoko was a demi, belonging to the Dullahan type, a being from Irish folklore often linked to fairy legends. As a Dullahan, her head and body were separated. Tetsuo asked if it was safe to touch the flame around her neck and whether it was hot. He tried to reach out and touch it, realizing it wasn't hot at all. It felt more like touching the air, almost like it wasn't even there. Suddenly, Kyoko winced slightly, explaining that when someone touched the flame, it felt like her nerves were being tugged a little, which made it uncomfortable. Tetsuo quickly apologized, then asked if her body could really be considered part of her when separated. To prove it, Kyoko moved her body by guiding it with her hand, showing that it was indeed hers. Tetsuo was amazed by how connected the two parts were. He then asked whether when she fainted, it was okay to lift her head and body separately. Kyoko said it was fine, and even mentioned that once her body and head were as far apart as Tokyo and Okayama. She explained that her mother's parents lived in Okayama, and she visited them every year. But once, while she was saying goodbye on the train, it suddenly departed, leaving her head behind. Tetsuo was stunned. The situation was beyond anything he could have imagined. He realized that Kyoko's life must not have been easy. Kyoko said she managed those difficulties with help from her family, along with a mix of experience and cleverness to adapt to daily life. When she ate, she would hold her head in her arms, and when she bathed, she would hang it nearby. Tetsuo admitted that he learned a lot from her. Kyoko considered herself lucky to handle things on her own, but she also confessed that social interactions could be tough. People often got startled when they first saw her, and it always took a while before they felt comfortable around her. Because she had been sick, she missed the opening ceremony and was absent from school for 3 days. Even when she tried to push herself to go, she ended up collapsing again. She started to feel like there was some distance between her and her classmates, except for Hikari, who was always friendly with her. Kyoko noticed that her classmates avoided talking about Dullahans, even though she really wanted to joke about it sometimes. As she looked at Tetsuo, he asked whether she had ever tried making such jokes herself. She admitted she hadn't. Tetsuo suggested that maybe she could start there. Making light jokes could help set the mood and show her classmates what kind of humor she was comfortable with. He said it all came down to who would take the first step. Kyoko realized then that maybe her classmates were the ones unsure how to begin. Tetsuo laughed, saying that Kyoko was probably the first Dullahan they had ever seen. He mentioned that there were only 3 Dullahans in the entire world. Kyoko was surprised that he knew that fact and was deeply touched when Tetsuo said that all demi-students were precious. Her face turned red as she hesitated to ask for something. She finally told Tetsuo that she wanted him to give her a hug. The blue flame on her neck flickered brightly as she said it. Tetsuo was startled and asked if she was sure about her request. Kyoko clarified that she only wanted him to hug her head. Tetsuo gently held her head in his arms. Kyoko looked nervous but also happy. She said she really loved being hugged. Her parents often did that when she was little. But ever since she started high school, it told her she needed to grow out of that habit, even though she couldn't help it. There was no one else she felt close enough to ask for comfort like that. When a Dullahan's head was separated from its body, it couldn't move on its own and needed the touch of another person to be carried around. In a way, Dullahans naturally disliked being alone and could get lonely easily. Tetsuo released her gently and said that what he did probably wasn't appropriate for a teacher, though it was harmless as long as no one saw them. Still, it would be a big problem if the principal or Hikari happened to walk in. Unfortunately, Hikari did see them. Both Tetsuo and Kyoko froze in embarrassment as Hikari shouted, calling out to tell the others what she saw. Kyoko joked that after this, Tetsuo might become a Dullahan too, since she was sure someone might take his head off for it. Tetsuo panicked and quickly chased after Hikari, desperate to stop her from spreading the story. After school, Kyoko thanked Hikari because thanks to her, she had finally been able to talk with Tetsuo. Hikari laughed happily, remembering Tetsuo's panicked face from earlier that day. When she saw Yuki standing in front of her, Hikari rushed over and hugged her tightly, enjoying how cold Yuki's body felt. She didn't expect Yuki to live nearby. Hikari invited Yuki to walk home with her and introduced Kyoko along the way. Yuki said she had somewhere she needed to go, so she couldn't join them on the way home. Yuki, the snow girl from Class 1A, was described by Hikari as shy but kind. Hikari really liked how cool Yuki's body felt whenever she hugged her. When they reached the intersection, Hikari offered to have Kyoko stop by her place, but it was already getting late and Kyoko didn't want her parents to worry. A few moments later, Kyoko's phone rang. She struggled to reach it, so she stopped for a moment to answer. Her mother was calling and Kyoko explained that she was on her way home, apologizing because she had stayed a bit longer at school to talk with her teacher. That night, Kyoko straightened up her bed and got ready to sleep. She thought about how physical education class might be tough for her, so she made a note on her phone. She realized that Tetsuo was actually a kind person and she found herself wanting to talk with him again. The next day, Hikari was full of excitement when Kyoko told her she wanted to go on a date with a guy. Hikari couldn't hide her curiosity, but Kyoko still wasn't sure how the guy felt about her. Hikari was confident that he definitely liked Kyoko. After all, Kyoko was not only beautiful, but also charming in her own way. When Hikari noticed how doubtful Kyoko seemed, she asked if something was bothering her. Kyoko admitted that she felt uncertain because she was a Dullahan. She wondered aloud why being a Dullahan made it so hard for her to find love. Hikari guessed that Kyoko might have been thinking about the fact that there were only 3 Dullahans in the entire world. She told Kyoko that using that as an excuse to give up was silly. Hikari tried to lift her spirits, saying that being a Dullahan was actually what made Kyoko special. In her eyes, Dullahans were at the top of the romance pyramid. Hikari joked that Dullahans probably had their own unique ways of expressing affection. Kyoko was caught off guard and surprised that Hikari seemed to know about such things. Hikari then asked what kind of date Kyoko wanted. Blushing a little, Kyoko admitted that she liked when someone gently held her head, so she hoped the guy would carry it with him during their walk. She wanted to go anywhere with him, maybe somewhere quiet where if she looked out, she could see his face and a small movement would bring them closer together. It was a simple but sweet dream, and she really hoped it would come true. Hearing that, Hikari smiled warmly and called Kyoko a pure-hearted girl. She teased her, asking who the prince was that had captured her heart. Embarrassed, Kyoko hesitated to say it, but Hikari kept asking until Kyoko finally admitted that the person she wanted to go on a date with was Tetsuo. Hikari immediately grinned and without hesitation called Tetsuo right away, leaving Kyoko shocked by how fast she acted. The next day, Tetsuo and Kyoko met at Hikari's house. Kyoko's cheeks turned red when Tetsuo carefully held her head. Hikari encouraged them to go out shopping and told them not to come back until sunset. She couldn't help but notice how neatly dressed Kyoko was that day. Before they left, Kyoko had picked out a few outfits she thought would look nice for her date. However, her body would stay behind at Hikari's house and Hikari would be responsible for watching over it. When Hikari led Kyoko's body into the living room, she suddenly realized that Kyoko's body couldn't hear her while the head was away. Meanwhile, Tetsuo walked around carrying Kyoko's head gently in his arms. He asked what kind of experiment she was trying to do. Kyoko explained that if she ever found someone she truly liked, her head might start moving on its own, so she wanted to prepare for any problems that could come up when that happened. Tetsuo thought it was a good idea. At the same time, Hikari noticed Kyoko's body fidgeting nervously, as if trying to communicate something. It seemed to be making gestures, but Hikari couldn't quite understand them. She wondered what Kyoko and Tetsuo were talking about out there. Tetsuo and Kyoko later sat together on a park bench. Tetsuo rested Kyoko's head on his lap as they looked at the still green cherry blossom trees nearby. Kyoko said she hoped to see them again once they were in full bloom. She felt genuinely happy being there with him. Back at the house, Hikari watched Kyoko's body move and could tell from its subtle gestures that the date was going well. After a while, Kyoko's body reached into her bag, pulled out a notebook and pen, and began writing. Hikari was amazed that she could write without even looking. The message said that Kyoko was really enjoying the date and wanted to thank Hikari for everything. Reading that, Hikari felt relieved, but also oddly annoyed for some reason she couldn't explain. On a playful whim, she poked her fingers lightly into Kyoko's chest, and suddenly Kyoko let out a loud scream. Tatsuo was startled and quickly asked what was wrong. Kyoko's face turned red in embarrassment, and she said she had just remembered something funny. At that moment, back at the house, Hikari laughed when she saw Kyoko's body angrily waving its hands in protest, clearly upset with her teasing. Meanwhile, after leaving the park, Tatsuo invited Kyoko to take a walk around the city center and visit a few stores. While walking through the crowd, Tatsuo asked if everything was okay so far. Kyoko's face looked pale. She seemed to be feeling a bit motion sick. Seeing that, Tatsuo suggested they take a break and have some juice. After sitting down and drinking, Kyoko began to feel a little better. Tatsuo apologized, saying it was his first time going out with the Dulahan. Kyoko smiled and mentioned that it was also her first time going out with the guy. Curious, Tatsuo asked if their little experiment had worked. It was only then that Kyoko realized the outing had been part of Tatsuo's experiment. As they continued chatting, Kyoko began talking about Yuki, the snow girl from Class 1A. She told Tatsuo about the time Hikari suddenly hugged Yuki while they were walking home together. Yuki, however, didn't seem to enjoy it. She looked startled and uncomfortable, and that had bothered Kyoko a little. Suddenly, Kyoko felt the urge to go to the restroom. When she spotted one nearby, her body instinctively stood up, but her leg accidentally bumped into the table. Her body stumbled awkwardly, which caught Hikari by surprise. Confused but quick to help, Hikari handed Kyoko a notebook and a pen so she could write what she needed. Kyoko quickly scribbled the word toilet on the page. Realizing the situation, Hikari burst into laughter and felt relieved, then gently guided Kyoko's body toward the restroom. At that moment, Hikari's younger sister Himari happened to come home. Hikari calmly explained that it was her classmate, Adula Ann. Afterward, Kyoko felt much better, though she admitted to herself that she probably shouldn't have had that juice earlier. Tatsuo then continued their stroll, and Kyoko told him she was feeling better than before. She even complimented him, saying he was really impressive. That made Tatsuo recall something he had learned back in school. When people walk, their bodies move slightly up and down. Without realizing it, they use their neck and eyes to keep balance. But for a Dulahan like Kyoko, her arms serve the role of her neck, meaning she needs a dynamic way to maintain balance. When their walk came to an end, they returned to Hikari's house. Kyoko sincerely thanked Hikari for everything. Hikari was just about to bring up the restroom incident that had made her panic earlier, but Kyoko quickly covered her mouth in embarrassment. She also thanked Tatsuo for accompanying her that day, and Tatsuo in turn said he was grateful because he had learned so much from her. He gently patted Kyoko's head and said their experiment had been a big success. After that, Kyoko said goodbye and went home. Once she left, Hikari started telling Tatsuo more about Kyoko. The next day, Sakie noticed Tatsuo talking with the principal as they walked down the hallway. Tatsuo was asking the principal to allow Kyoko to use a backpack instead of a handbag. He explained that since one of Kyoko's hands was always used to hold her head, it was inconvenient and even risky for her to carry a regular bag in the other hand. The principal agreed to the request. Tetsuo also asked the principal to reconsider Kyoko's class advisor arrangements and wanted the request to be treated as an official directive from the principal himself. The following morning, Kyoko and Hikari greeted Tatsuo as they arrived at school. Tatsuo complimented Kyoko's new backpack, and Hikari said that Kyoko looked even cooler than usual. Tatsuo smiled and added that the backpack suited her perfectly. Every day, Sakie woke up early. She would wash her face and make breakfast right away. At that time, Sakie was 24 years old and still single. That morning, she was watching TV while enjoying her breakfast. The show was talking about love and relationships based on zodiac signs. Sakie couldn't help thinking that she probably couldn't hope for a normal relationship since she was a succubus. Early in the morning, she walked to the station. When she arrived, she was still sleepy and almost bumped into a man in front of her. She quickly stepped aside because she always tried her best to avoid physical contact with men. Not long after, the train heading to Shibasaki arrived. When Sakie reached the school, she immediately started cleaning. The principal greeted her and she looked quite nervous. The principal praised her for always coming in early and helping clean the place. Sakie said she simply liked keeping things tidy, though in truth, she came early because she didn't have much to do at home. As the students began arriving, they greeted Sakie warmly. That day, she noticed how close Hikari and Tatsuo seemed. Hikari asked Tatsuo to greet everyone with more energy that morning. She also thanked him for helping with the backpack approval issue, but Tatsuo was the one who thanked her instead, admitting that he should have thought about it earlier. Sakie realized that Tetsuo was actually a very kind person. She felt a bit bad for having scolded him before, but at that time she did it because she had to be careful not to touch men carelessly. After finishing her class, one of the students came to ask for help with a math problem. Sakie showed the student the correct formula, and the student thanked her. While she explained, the student couldn't help but look at her face and mentioned that she was really beautiful, suggesting she might look even better with more makeup. Sakie gently replied that her appearance was already fine the way it was. She avoided using too much makeup because it could unintentionally trigger her natural charm as a succubus, something that could make others overly attracted to her. Succubi like Sakie could release a natural charm that influenced others, especially men, but with discipline and modest clothing, they could keep things under control and live normally among people. While Sakie was walking down the hallway, Yusuke accidentally bumped into her. He immediately apologized, but the brief moment left him flustered, and he quickly remembered that Sakie was a succubus. To avoid problems like that, Sakie always took the very first and the very last trains each day to stay away from the morning rush. However, it wasn't easy. Waking up before dawn and getting home late every night started to exhaust her. One day, she dozed off on the train, and nearby passengers began acting oddly in their sleep. When a succubus falls asleep, she can't fully control her aura, and it might influence others' dreams without her intending to. That was why people sometimes called succubi dream demons. Because of this, Sakie couldn't live in regular apartment complexes or crowded neighborhoods. That night, she returned home, cleaned herself up, and sighed softly. She was ready to keep facing her daily life, even though it was hard for a succubus to live like everyone else. Sometimes she wondered if life would be easier if she could get married and have a family, but she had never been in a real relationship before. Being a succubus should have made dating easy. She knew that if she dressed more attractively, plenty of men would be drawn to her. But to her, that wasn't real love. Those feelings would only be illusions, not genuine emotions. She often wondered if men felt differently about love than she did when they fell for someone. That night, Sakie had a little sake at home. She felt free and relaxed in her own space. The next morning, she followed her usual routine, waking up, having breakfast, and catching the first train. When she arrived at school, she felt unusually sleepy, probably because she had drunk a little too much the night before. She lightly patted her cheeks to keep herself awake. Suddenly, she tripped and almost fell, but Tetsuo quickly caught her hand before she hit the ground. He asked if she was okay. It was only then that Sakie realized they were touching, and she immediately pulled away, blushing with embarrassment. Tetsuo simply smiled and reminded her not to focus only on taking care of the students, but also to take care of herself. His calm reaction surprised Sakie. Most men would have reacted very differently after touching a succubus, even briefly. She began to wonder if maybe her succubus aura didn't affect people who naturally had stronger self-control or a calmer temperament. Sakie thought that perhaps when it came to love, she and Tetsuo might be on the same wavelength, something she had never experienced before. Tetsuo hadn't realized how long he'd been holding himself back ever since he stepped away from Sakie. As a succubus, Sakie naturally gave off a kind of alluring energy that could be hard to ignore, but Tetsuo managed to stay composed. When he finally returned to his office, he began working on another article about Demis. He had come to understand that a succubus, often referred to as a dream demon, was a type of Aegean who could unintentionally give off an aphrodisiac-like effect on others. In just a short time, he had already met a vampire, a Dullahan, and a snow woman. Not long after, Hikari stopped by his office to take a break. It was an extremely hot day, and being in class under the blazing sun had really worn her out. She peeked at Tetsuo's laptop screen and noticed what he was writing. Hikari was surprised to see that Tetsuo was writing an article about her. In his notes, Tetsuo had written about Hikari's sensitivity to sunlight, her eating patterns, the need for blood intake, and her reaction to things like crosses and garlic. He had also included some personal observations about how blood intake might relate to emotional or romantic feelings. Hikari blushed when she saw that part. Tetsuo apologized for mentioning something that might sound embarrassing, but Hikari actually found the topic interesting and wanted to talk more about it. Encouraged by her curiosity, Tetsuo asked a few follow-up questions about how vampires perceived affection and intimacy. He'd heard that drinking someone's blood might have a deeper symbolic meaning among vampires, and he wanted to understand it better. Hikari seemed flustered and asked if he was comparing that act to a kiss.